Olivia Bennett stared at her computer screen, trying to focus on the quarterly marketing report that needed to be finished by morning. The office was quiet now, most of her co-workers at Sterling Innovations having left hours ago. At 29, she had built a solid reputation as a dependable marketing coordinator, someone who paid attention to every detail and never missed a deadline. Her desk sat on the 32nd floor, just down the hall from the executive offices. From her window, she could see the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over the skyline. She should have been focused on work, but her mind kept drifting to the man whose office was 3 doors down. Jonathan Pierce had been the CEO of Sterling Innovations for 5 years. At 37, he had transformed a struggling tech company into an industry leader. He was brilliant, driven, and frustratingly kind in ways that made Olivia's heart ache every time she passed him in the hallway. She had never planned to develop feelings for him. It started innocently enough: admiration for his leadership style, respect for how he treated every employee with genuine consideration. But somewhere along the way, admiration had bloomed into something deeper, something that kept her awake at night and made her pulse race whenever he stopped by her department. Her therapist, Dr. Patricia Morrison, had suggested an exercise during their last session. "Write him a letter," she had said gently. "You don't have to send it. Just write down everything you feel. Sometimes putting emotions on paper helps us process them and let them go." So Olivia had spent her evening doing exactly that. She poured her heart onto the pages, describing how his laugh made her feel warm inside, how she noticed the way he always remembered people's birthdays, how she dreamed about conversations that would never happen. The letter was raw, honest, and deeply personal. It was also never supposed to leave her apartment. The mix-up but tonight. Exhausted from preparing materials for tomorrow's client presentation, Olivia made a mistake that would change everything. She had printed 2 documents on the same cream-colored paper, both placed in matching folders. One contained the marketing presentation for the Horizon Tech account, which needed to be on Jonathan's desk for his early morning review. The other contained her therapy letter. Her eyes burned with fatigue as she gathered her things. She placed one folder in the delivery tray outside Jonathan's office, the one where important documents were left for his 6 a.m. arrival. The other folder went into her bag. She locked her computer, grabbed her coat, and headed home. Thinking only of her comfortable bed and her rescue cat, Whiskers, the next morning began normally. Olivia arrived at 7:30, as she did every Tuesday, grabbing coffee from the break room before settling at her desk. She pulled out her laptop and reached into her bag for the presentation folder. Planning to review it one final time before the client meeting at 9, her fingers touched the cream-colored folder. She pulled it out, opened it, and felt her entire world collapse. The Horizon Tech presentation stared back at her, which meant the other folder, the one with her letter confessing her deepest feelings for Jonathan Pierce, was currently sitting on his desk. He had probably already read it. Panic sets in. Olivia's coffee cup slipped from her hand, splashing across her desk. She barely noticed. Her vision tunneled, her breathing became shallow, her hand started shaking so violently she had to grip the edge of her desk to steady herself. This could not be happening. In 6 years of working at Sterling Innovations, she had never made a mistake like this. She was the person others relied on to catch errors, to maintain order, to handle sensitive information with absolute discretion. She stood abruptly, her chair rolling backward and hitting the wall. Several co-workers glanced her way, but Olivia was already moving, half walking, half running toward the elevators. She jabbed the button repeatedly, her heart pounding so hard she felt lightheaded. The executive floor was quiet when she arrived. Jonathan's assistant, Michael, had not yet arrived for the day. Through the frosted glass of Jonathan's office door, she could see a light on. He was already here. Olivia approached the door on trembling legs. Should she knock? Burst in? Pretend she needed to retrieve the wrong folder? Her hand hovered over the door handle, but she could not make herself turn it. What would she even say? Instead, she retreated to the women's restroom and locked herself in the furthest stall. She sat on the closed toilet lid, head in her hands, trying to control her breathing. 6 years of professionalism, destroyed in one careless moment. She would be fired, certainly. Worse, she would have to face Jonathan every day until she could find a new job. Knowing he had read every vulnerable word she had written, her phone buzzed in her pocket. With shaking hands, she pulled it out and saw a message from Jonathan's private number. The one only senior staff had access to. "Olivia, please come to my office immediately. We need to discuss something important." JP, the summons Olivia, felt like she might be sick. The formal tone of the message left no room for hope. He was probably calling her in to terminate her employment personally. Trying to handle the awkward situation with as much dignity as possible, she stood, smoothed her skirt, and checked her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She took 3 deep breaths, the way Dr. Morrison had taught her, and walked back to the elevator. The ride to the executive floor felt eternal. When the doors opened, she forced herself to move forward. Michael had arrived and gave her a curious look as she passed his desk. But she could not bring herself to return his usual morning greeting. She knocked twice on Jonathan's door, each tap feeling like a nail in her career's coffin. "Come in," his voice called from inside. Olivia turned the handle and stepped into the office. Jonathan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his back to her. On his desk, clearly visible, was her letter. The pages slightly wrinkled, as though they had been read multiple times. He closed the door. "Please," Jonathan said without turning around. She obeyed, the soft click of the latch sounding impossibly loud in the quiet office. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the muted sounds of the city far below and the thundering of her pulse in her ears. "I am so sorry," Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. The letter was for therapy, for closure. I never meant for you to see it. I will clean out my desk right away." Jonathan turned to face her, and Olivia's prepared speech died in her throat. She had expected anger, perhaps embarrassment, maybe the cold professional mask he wore during difficult board meetings. Instead, his expression held something she could not quite identify, something intense and searching that made her breath catch. "You wrote this for therapy?" he asked quietly, his dark eyes holding hers. "Yes, my therapist suggested it might help me move past these feelings. It was supposed to be destroyed." Olivia's voice trembled. "I understand if you want me to leave the company." Jonathan picked up the letter from his desk, handling it carefully, almost reverently. "How long have you felt this way, Olivia?" The question hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying. What did it matter now? What did she have left to lose? "About 18 months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Since the company charity event at the children's hospital, you spent 3 hours reading stories to the kids, even though you had a board meeting the next morning. You made that little girl with leukemia laugh so hard she forgot about being sick for a while." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I know this is completely inappropriate. You are my CEO, and I am just a marketing coordinator. And there are policies, and I've ruined everything professional between us." "Stop," Jonathan said firmly, crossing the distance between them in 4 long strides. Suddenly he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gray just beginning to show at his temples. He reached past her, and for a confused moment, she thought he might be opening the door to escort her out. Instead, he turned the lock with a decisive click. When he looked at her again, something vulnerable and hopeful flickered in his expression. "You have not ruined anything, Olivia. You have just given me something I thought was impossible." Olivia stood frozen, her mind struggling to process Jonathan's words. The locked door, his intense gaze, the gentle way he held her letter like it was something precious rather than a career-ending disaster. Nothing made sense. "I don't understand," she managed to whisper, her voice barely steady. "What do you mean, something impossible?" Jonathan set the letter down on the corner of his desk and ran a hand through his dark hair. She had seen him make that gesture countless times during stressful negotiations, but never with this particular edge of nervousness. He walked back toward the windows, putting some distance between them, as though he needed space to gather his thoughts. 3 years ago, he began, his voice low and measured. "I attended a leadership conference in Boston. Sterling Innovations was struggling then. We had just lost a major contract, and there were rumors about potential bankruptcy. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and seriously questioning whether I was the right person to lead this company. Olivia remembered that time. The entire office had been tense, people updating their resumes, whispering about layoffs. She had been working in the marketing department for only 3 years then, still proving herself. On the second day of the conference, Jonathan continued. There was a workshop about authentic leadership and company culture. I almost skipped it. I had calls to make, fires to put out. But something made me go. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her heart skip. You were there. The memory he carried Olivia's breath caught. She remembered that conference. Her department head had sent her as a representative, a chance to network and learn. She had felt out of place among all the executives and senior managers. I watched you during the breakout session, Jonathan said, his eyes never leaving hers. The facilitator asked everyone to share one thing they loved about their job. Most people gave generic answers about challenges and growth opportunities, but you talked about a campaign you had worked on for a small nonprofit client. You said that watching their donations increase because of the marketing strategy you created made you feel like your work actually mattered in the world. He took a step closer. Your face lit up when you spoke. You were not trying to impress anyone or network your way up the corporate ladder. You genuinely cared about making a difference. In that moment, sitting in that conference room in Boston, I realized what had been missing from Sterling Innovations. We had lost sight of why our work mattered. Olivia felt tears gathering in her eyes. She had no idea he had even noticed her that day. When I got back to the office, Jonathan continued, I restructured our entire company mission around that principle. Making technology that actually improves people's lives, not just generates profit. That shift saved Sterling Innovations. But more than that, you saved me from becoming the kind of leader I never wanted to be. His voice dropped lower. And I have been aware of you every single day since then. The way you celebrate small victories with your team, how you stay late to help junior coordinators with their presentations, the fact that you bring homemade soup when someone is sick, you wear your grandmother's bracelet on difficult days because you say it brings you courage. Olivia touched the silver bracelet on her wrist unconsciously. Shocked that he had noticed such a small detail, the truth he had hidden for 3 years, Jonathan said. And now there was something raw in his voice. I have maintained absolute professional distance because it was the right thing to do. Because you deserve to work in an environment where you are valued for your talent and hard work, not complicated by your boss having feelings for you. Because I refuse to be the kind of man who abuses his position of power. He moved closer again. Close enough that she could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. But every board meeting where you present marketing data, every company event where you laugh with your colleagues, every morning when you walk past my office, I have wanted to tell you that you are the first person I think about when I wake up and the last thought in my mind before I sleep.
Ow.
Olivia felt dizzy. The office seemed to tilt around her. This could not be real. Jonathan Pierce, the brilliant CEO who had turned Sterling Innovations into an industry leader, could not possibly have feelings for her. Why did you never say anything? She asked, her voice stronger now, despite the trembling in her hands. For the same reason you did not, Jonathan replied. The power imbalance. The professional complications. The risk that I was misreading those moments when our eyes met across the conference room. When you smiled at something I said during presentations, when I caught you looking at me the same way I was trying not to look at you. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted, and gently took her hand. Tell me I was not wrong, Olivia. Tell me I did not imagine those moments. The professional solution, you were not wrong, Olivia admitted, the words rushing out. But Jonathan, this is complicated. You are the CEO. There are policies, procedures, ethics, guidelines. People will talk. They will say, I used you to advance my career, or that you are taking advantage of your position. I know, Jonathan said firmly, which is why before we continue this conversation, I need to do something. He released her hand and walked to his desk, pressing the intercom button. Michael, please ask Catherine from Human Resources and Thomas from Legal to come to my office immediately. Tell them it is urgent. Olivia's stomach dropped. You are firing me? No. Jonathan turned back to her, and his expression was resolute. I am making sure that everything we do from this moment forward is completely transparent and properly documented. I will not have anyone question your integrity or suggest that our relationship, if you want there to be a relationship, is anything other than between two consenting adults who happen to work for the same company. The word relationship hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and fear in equal measure. Within minutes, there was a knock at the door. Jonathan unlocked it to admit Catherine Walsh, the head of human resources, and Thomas Green, the senior legal counsel. Both looked curious and slightly concerned about the early morning summons. Catherine. Thomas, thank you for coming so quickly, Jonathan said, his voice shifting into his professional CEO tone. Though Olivia noticed he moved to stand beside her, a subtle show of solidarity. I need to discuss a personal situation that requires immediate action to ensure we maintain proper professional boundaries. Catherine pulled out her tablet, already taking notes. Thomas did the same, his expression neutral but attentive. I have romantic feelings for Olivia Bennett, Jonathan stated clearly, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. As of this morning, I have reason to believe those feelings are mutual. I want to pursue a relationship with her, but only if we can do so in a way that protects her career and professional reputation completely. The new beginning, Catherine's expression shifted from surprise to something almost warm. Well, that is certainly unexpected. Olivia, is this accurate? Do you want to pursue a relationship with Jonathan? Olivia looked at Jonathan, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes. At the man who had restructured his entire company philosophy based on something she had said years ago. She thought about the 18 months of secret longing, the dreams she had told herself were impossible, the letter that had accidentally revealed the truth. Yes, she said firmly. I do. Thomas typed rapidly on his tablet. Here's what needs to happen immediately. Olivia, you cannot continue reporting to Jonathan in any capacity. We need to restructure your position. I recommend a promotion to a senior role in a different department. With increased compensation to reflect your expanded responsibilities, there can be no reporting relationship, direct or indirect. Between you two, the product development team has been requesting a senior marketing strategist, Olivia said, her mind already working through possibilities. I have been interested in that area for 2 years. I have even taken evening courses in product lifecycle management. Jonathan looked at her with unmistakable pride. That team would be fortunate to have you. And Olivia, your salary will increase by 25% to reflect the senior position and your additional qualifications. That seems excessive, Olivia protested. It is what the position pays, Jonathan said gently but firmly. This is a promotion you have earned through your work over the past 6 years. It's not compensation for dating the CEO. Catherine can show you the salary range for that role. Catherine nodded, making notes. I will prepare the transfer paperwork today. Olivia, you will start in product development on Monday. Jonathan, we will begin the search for a replacement marketing coordinator to handle your direct needs. Both of you will need to sign acknowledgement forms about the company's relationship disclosure policy. And this situation will be documented with the board of directors to ensure complete transparency. As Catherine and Thomas gathered their materials, discussing logistics and timelines, Jonathan turned to Olivia. The professional mask had slipped again, revealing that same nervous vulnerability. Olivia, he said quietly, so only she could hear, would you have dinner with me tonight? A real date. Not as CEO and employee, but as Jonathan and Olivia. Two people who have been pretending not to feel something for far too long. She looked up at him. This man who had noticed every small detail about her, who had maintained respectful distance for 3 years rather than abuse his power, who had just restructured her entire career to protect her reputation. Yes, she said, unable to stop the smile that spread across her face despite the tears gathering in her eyes. I would love that. Catherine cleared her throat gently. One more thing. I recommend you both take today off. Let us handle the paperwork and notifications. Come back Monday with fresh starts in your new professional arrangement. And congratulations. This is unusual, but I think you are both handling it with remarkable integrity. As the HR director and legal counsel left the office, Jonathan and Olivia stood facing each other, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the beginning of something neither had dared to hope for. "I cannot believe this is happening," Olivia whispered. Jonathan reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "I've been trying not to believe it was possible for 3 years. Thank you for accidentally making me hope again," she laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. "Thank you for not firing me for the most unprofessional mistake of my career." "That letter," Jonathan said softly, "was the bravest thing I have ever read. It gave me permission to finally be honest about what I have been feeling." He took both her hands in his. "So let me be clear now, without any confusion or mixed-up folders. I have feelings for you, Olivia Bennett. Deep, genuine feelings that have nothing to do with work and everything to do with who you are as a person. I would like the chance to explore where those feelings might lead if you are willing." Olivia squeezed his hands, feeling like her heart might burst. "I am very willing." "Then let's get out of this office," Jonathan said with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Let's go have coffee somewhere far away from Sterling Innovations and talk like two normal people who just started dating in the most unconventional way possible." As they left the office together, Olivia realized that her terrible mistake had not destroyed her career after all. It had opened a door she thought would always remain closed, leading to a future she had only dared to dream about in her most private moments. 6 months had passed since the morning that changed everything. Olivia sat in her new office on the 28th floor, reviewing product launch strategies for Sterling Innovations' newest software platform. Her role as senior marketing strategist in the product development division had exceeded every expectation. She had led 3 successful campaigns, mentored 2 junior team members, and earned the respect of colleagues who knew nothing about her personal relationship with the CEO. That was the hardest part. Keeping their relationship private while it was still new, still fragile, still theirs alone to nurture without the scrutiny of the entire company. They had agreed to wait before going public, to build a foundation strong enough to withstand the inevitable gossip and speculation. Their first official date had been magical. Jonathan took her to a small French bistro in a neighborhood far from their usual business circles. They talked for 4 hours about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up as the youngest of 3 brothers, always trying to prove himself. She shared stories about her grandmother who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident. When she was 12, over the following months, they built something real. Weekend mornings at farmers markets. Quiet evenings cooking dinner together in her apartment, while Whiskers supervised from the counter. Late-night phone calls when work kept them apart. Jonathan taught her to play chess. She introduced him to her love of old movies and classic literature. But the secrecy was becoming harder to maintain. Olivia felt the weight of it every time. A colleague invited her to happy hour and she had to decline because she was meeting Jonathan. Every time someone asked if she was dating anyone, and she had to deflect the question. Every time she wanted to reach for his hand during a company event and had to stop herself, the crisis that tests everything. The tension came to a head on a Tuesday afternoon in early October. Olivia was in a product development meeting when her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Jonathan's assistant, Michael. "Emergency board meeting called. Major crisis. Jonathan asked me to let you know he will need to cancel dinner tonight." Her stomach tightened with concern. She excused herself from the meeting and called Michael directly. "What happened?" she asked quietly, stepping into an empty conference room. "Griffin Technologies is trying a hostile takeover," Michael said, his voice tense. "They've been buying up shares quietly for months. They made their move this morning." The board is in crisis mode, Olivia's mind raced. Griffin Technologies was Sterling Innovations' biggest competitor. It's known for aggressive business tactics and a track record of acquiring companies only to strip them for parts. If they succeeded, everything Jonathan had built, the culture of innovation and genuine care for employees, would be destroyed. She returned to her office and spent the next 3 hours researching every detail she could find about Griffin's previous acquisitions. By 7 that evening, she had compiled a comprehensive analysis of their strategies and potential vulnerabilities. She sent it to Jonathan's secure email with a simple message, "Thought this might help? I believe in you." His response came 20 minutes later. "Can you come to my apartment? I need to see you. Standing together in the storm, Olivia had only been to Jonathan's penthouse apartment twice before, both times for quiet dinners when they wanted complete privacy. Tonight, she found him standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His tie loosened, his jacket discarded on the couch. He looked exhausted and worried in a way she had never seen. "Okay," she said softly. Setting down her bag and crossing to him, he turned and pulled her into his arms immediately, holding her tight. "Thank you for the research. It was incredibly helpful. Thomas used some of your points in his presentation to the board. What are they recommending?" Olivia asked, her cheek pressed against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "A white knight defense. Find a friendlier company to acquire us before Griffin can complete their takeover. But it means I would lose control of Sterling Innovations. Everything I have built for 8 years would belong to someone else." His voice cracked slightly. "I know it is just a company, just business, but it feels like losing a part of myself." Olivia pulled back to look at him. "It is not just a company. It is a place where people feel valued and respected, where innovation matters more than profit margins, where a young marketing coordinator could feel safe enough to care about her work making a difference." She cupped his face in her hands. "That matters, Jonathan. That is worth fighting for." "The board wants an answer by Friday," he said. "Accept the White Knight offer, or risk Griffin completing the hostile takeover and dismantling everything." "There has to be another option," Olivia said firmly. She walked to his dining table, pulling out her laptop. "Let me see the numbers. Maybe there is something everyone is missing." He spent the next 4 hours going through financial statements, shareholder agreements, and market analyses. Around midnight, fueled by coffee and determination, Olivia noticed something in the documentation. "Jonathan, look at this," she said, pointing to her screen. "Griffin's funding for the acquisition is coming from a consortium of 3 investment firms, but one of them, Westbridge Capital, has a clause in their partnership agreement that allows them to withdraw from joint ventures if certain ethical standards are not met." Jonathan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the document. "How did you find this?" "I remembered reading an article about Westbridge 6 months ago. They pulled out of a deal with a pharmaceutical company over ethical concerns about drug pricing." She pulled up another tab. "Griffin Technologies has 2 ongoing lawsuits for unfair labor practices and 1 investigation for environmental violations. What if we approach Westbridge directly and make them aware of exactly what they would be funding?" The plan that changed everything. Jonathan stared at her for a long moment, then grabbed his phone. "Thomas needs to see this. Tonight." By 2 in the morning, Jonathan's dining room had become a war room. Thomas Green, Catherine Walsh, and 2 board members sat around the table, examining Olivia's research and building a strategy. "This could work," Thomas said, his excitement growing. "If Westbridge withdraws, Griffin loses 30% of their acquisition funding. That would halt the takeover long enough for us to mount a proper defense. We would need documentation of Griffin's violations," one of the board members said. "Hard evidence that Westbridge could not ignore." "I can have that compiled by morning," Olivia said. "I have been tracking their business practices for a competitive analysis project last quarter. I have citations, court documents, regulatory filings, everything." Catherine looked at her with new respect. "You kept that level of detail on a competitor?" "I believe in being thorough," Olivia said simply. Jonathan met her eyes across the table, and the look he gave her held such pride and gratitude that she felt her heart expand. This was what partnership looked like. Not just romance, but standing together when everything was falling apart, using every skill and resource to protect what mattered. By Thursday afternoon, armed with Olivia's meticulously documented evidence, Thomas and Jonathan met with Westbridge Capital's leadership. The meeting lasted 6 hours. By Friday morning, Westbridge announced their withdrawal from the acquisition consortium. Without adequate funding, Griffin Technologies was forced to abandon the hostile takeover attempt. Sterling Innovations was safe. The decision to go public that Friday evening, Jonathan called an all-hands company meeting. The entire staff gathered in the main conference center, buzzing with questions about the crisis that had dominated the news cycle all week. Jonathan stood at the podium, looking more relaxed than he had in days. I want to thank everyone for your patience and trust this week. As you have heard, Sterling Innovations faced a significant threat. I am happy to announce that threat has been neutralized. Our company remains independent and committed to our core mission." Applause filled the room. Jonathan waited for it to quiet before continuing. "I also want to recognize someone whose work was instrumental in protecting this company. 6 months ago, Olivia Bennett moved from marketing coordination to a senior strategist role in product development. This week, her research, analytical skills, and dedication provided the key insight that saved Sterling Innovations." Olivia felt her face flush as colleagues turned to look at her. She had been standing near the back of the room, trying to remain inconspicuous. "Olivia," Jonathan said, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room, "would you please come up here?" Her legs felt unsteady as she made her way through the crowd. When she reached the podium, Jonathan handed her a small crystal award, the kind the company gave for exceptional achievement. "Thank you," he said formally, but his eyes held a warmth that went beyond professional appreciation. Then, in a voice that carried through the silent room, he added, "And I want everyone here to know something else." Olivia's breath caught. They had not discussed this. They had agreed to wait to keep their relationship private until the timing was right. "Olivia and I have been dating for 6 months," Jonathan said clearly. "Our relationship began only after she was moved to a different department with no reporting connection to me. Human resources and legal have been aware from the beginning. Everything has been handled with complete transparency and adherence to company policy." The room was utterly silent. Olivia could feel hundreds of eyes on them. "I am telling you this now," Jonathan continued, "because after this week, after watching Olivia fight for this company with everything she had, I realized something. I am tired of hiding the fact that I have found someone extraordinary. Someone who makes me better at my job and better as a person. Someone I want standing beside me, not just in crisis, but in everything." He turned to face her fully, taking her hand in front of the entire company. "Olivia Bennett, these 6 months have been the happiest of my life. I know we talked about waiting longer before going public, but I do not want to wait anymore. I want everyone to know that you are the person I choose. Today and every day moving forward." The perfect moment, then, to Olivia's complete shock. Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The conference room erupted in gasps and whispers. "I had a whole plan for this," Jonathan said, his voice softer now, "meant just for her, even though hundreds were watching. A romantic dinner, a perfect sunset, a carefully rehearsed speech. But this week taught me that the perfect moment is not about the setting. It is about the truth. And the truth is that I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Olivia, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face. This was not how she had imagined this moment. She had pictured something private, intimate, just the two of them. But looking at Jonathan now, at the vulnerability and hope in his eyes, at the company of people they both cared about surrounding them, she realized this was perfect in its own way. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." The room exploded in applause and cheers as Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her gently, and Olivia felt the last weight of secrecy lift from her shoulders. When they finally broke apart, still holding each other close, Catherine Walsh stepped forward with a knowing smile. "I suppose I should mention that HR already has all the updated paperwork, ready for a CEO's spouse working in the company. We have been prepared for this possibility for about 5 months now." The crowd laughed, and Olivia buried her face in Jonathan's shoulder, overwhelmed by joy and relief and the beautiful impossibility of how her life had changed. 1 year later, Olivia stood in her grandmother's wedding dress. Looking at herself in the full-length mirror, the vintage lace fit perfectly, just as her grandmother had promised it would when she gave it to Olivia on her 18th birthday. "She would be so proud of you," her best friend Rachel said, adjusting the veil. "Finding someone who loves you exactly as you are." Through the window of the bridal suite, Olivia could see the garden where the ceremony would take place in 20 minutes. White chairs filled with friends, family, and colleagues from Sterling Innovations. She spotted Catherine and Thomas in the front row, the two people who would help make this day possible by ensuring everything was handled correctly from the start. There was a soft knock at the door. 5 minutes, the wedding coordinator called. Olivia took a deep breath, touching the silver bracelet on her wrist. Her grandmother's bracelet that had brought her courage through so many difficult days. Today, she did not need courage. She needed only to walk down the aisle to the man who had loved her long before either of them had found the words to say it. The music began. Rachel handed her the bouquet of sunflowers and white roses. As Olivia stepped into the garden, she saw Jonathan standing beneath the flower-covered arch, and the look on his face made her heart soar. This was not the life she had planned when she wrote that therapy letter 18 months ago. It was so much better, not because Jonathan was wealthy or successful, but because he was kind and genuine and saw her as his equal partner in everything. As she reached the altar and took his hands, Jonathan whispered, "Thank you for mixing up those folders." Olivia laughed softly, tears of joy gathering in her eyes. "Best mistake I ever made." The officiant began the ceremony, but Olivia barely heard the words. She was too busy memorizing this moment. The feeling of Jonathan's hands holding hers. The way the afternoon sunlight made everything golden. The faces of people they loved witnessing their promise to each other. When it came time for the vows, Jonathan spoke first. "Olivia, you taught me that leadership is not about power or control, but about creating space for others to be their best selves. You showed me that love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day with honesty and care. I promise to be your partner in all things, to stand beside you in crisis and celebration, to build a life with you that honors both of our dreams." Olivia's voice was steady as she replied, "Jonathan, you taught me that being seen and valued is not about demanding attention, but about being quietly present until the right moment arrives. You showed me that courage sometimes looks like patience, and that the best things in life are worth waiting for. I promise to be your partner in all things, to challenge you when you need it, and support you always. To build a life with you that makes both of us better than we could ever be alone." As they exchanged rings and sealed their promises with a kiss, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought them here. A therapy letter that was never meant to be sent. A terrible mistake that became the best thing that ever happened to her. A love story that began with honesty was built on respect and would last a lifetime. Sometimes the wrong envelope delivered to the right person changes everything.